Imagine working day and night for over a decade, sending every penny you earn to your family, building them a dream house from far away, only to come back home, expecting a hero's welcome, and finding that everything you sacrificed for was taken from you in an instant. This is the story of Kofi Eja, a man who went through the ultimate test of loyalty, betrayal, and the true meaning of family. Kofi Eja, a hard-working Nigerian man, spent over 10 years working abroad. His goal was simple: to give his family the life they deserved. Every month, he sent money home to his elder sister, Ifya, who was entrusted with overseeing the construction of the family house. Kofi dreamed of the day he would return to see the house finished, his father safe, and his family proud of everything he had worked for. His dreams were close to becoming a reality, but one day, something unexpected happened. Kofi was suddenly told to leave the country. There were no warnings, no time to pack up his things, and no chance to say goodbye to the life he had built. Kofi was deported, sent back to Nigeria with nothing but the clothes on his back, and the hope that his family would welcome him home with open arms. He was nervous but excited. Kofi thought, when I walk in, they'll be so proud of me. The house will be ready. My father will finally have everything he needs. But when Kofi arrived, things weren't what he had imagined. The streets were just as he remembered, but the feeling in the air was different. Kofi walked up to his sister Ifya's house with a big smile on his face, expecting a warm hug, maybe even a little party to celebrate his return. Instead, what he got was nothing like he expected. Ifya was standing at the door, but she didn't look happy. She didn't even smile. Kofi's heart sank. "Welcome back, Kofi," Ifya said coldly, her arms crossed. "But I'm afraid that house is no longer yours." Kofi was stunned. "What do you mean? I sent money for that house for years. It's mine." But Ifya shook her head, not giving him a chance to explain. "The house is mine now. You're not part of it anymore. It's over." Kofi stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say. The one person he trusted to help him had just turned her back on him. How could this be happening? He had worked so hard, sent money all these years, and now it was all gone. Just like that. His heart was racing, and he couldn't understand it. Why would his sister betray him like this? But it didn't end there. Kofi tried to turn to his father for support. Surely his father would understand, right? After all, he had been the one Kofi had worked so hard to care for. Kofi walked into the house, looking for his father. But when he found him, something even worse happened. His father, who had always been his biggest supporter, was standing by Ifya. "Kofi," his father said, shaking his head. "I was told you weren't sending money anymore. Ifya has been taking care of things, and I've decided to support her." "I'm sorry." Kofi's world fell apart. His own father, who had always been his hero, had turned against him. All his years of hard work, sending money back home, had been for nothing. It was like a nightmare. He had nowhere to turn. Just when Kofi thought it couldn't get worse, he turned to the one person he thought would never leave him, his wife, Kwame. But when he saw her, his heart sank even further. "Kwame," Kofi began, his voice shaky, "I'm home. I know I don't have the money I promised, but I've been through so much." But before he could finish, Kwame turned away. "I don't want to hear it, Kofi. You promised me a better life, but you've come back with nothing. You're a failure. I can't live like this anymore." With those harsh words, Kwame slammed the door in his face. Kofi couldn't believe it. The people he had loved, trusted, and worked so hard for had turned their backs on him. His heart broke. All he wanted was to be loved, to be accepted, but now he had no one left. He wandered the streets, unsure of where to go, feeling more alone than he ever had before. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, had crumbled right before his eyes. But little did he know, his journey was far from over. There was someone who would show him what loyalty and friendship really meant. Someone who would change everything. Kofi walked aimlessly through the streets, his mind racing. He had been turned away by the people he trusted the most: his sister, his father, and his wife. The weight of the world seemed to press down on his shoulders, and he couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. With nowhere else to go and no one left to turn to, Kofi's heart sank even further. He wandered the streets, feeling the weight of loneliness press down on him like never before. He had no family, no home, and no wife. He had nothing. The days turned into nights, and the nights seemed even darker. With nowhere to sleep, Kofi found an old, unfinished building. The walls were bare, the floors dusty, but it was the only place he could find some peace. He lay down on the cold floor, trying to sleep, but sleep didn't come. His thoughts raced, and he couldn't stop thinking about how his life had gone from hope to despair in the blink of an eye. In that lonely, cold building, Kofi made a vow to himself. He would rise again. He didn't know how, but he wasn't ready to give up. There had to be something, someone, who would show him kindness again. He just had to keep going. Days turned into weeks, and Kofi continued to work as a night security guard, watching over an old, empty building. He had no place to call home, but he was trying to stay strong. It wasn't easy. The nights were long, the silence was loud, and the cold floor of the building made it hard to sleep. Every time Kofi closed his eyes, he couldn't stop thinking about how his life had gone wrong. But then, one day, something amazing happened. Kofi was walking down the street, his shoulders slumped in defeat, when he heard someone call his name. It was a familiar voice, a voice that made Kofi stop in his tracks. "Kofi? Is that really you?" Kofi turned around, squinting in the bright sunlight. Standing there was Daniel, an old friend from the past. Daniel was someone Kofi had helped many years ago when he was going through a tough time. At the time, Kofi had never expected anything in return. He had just helped Daniel because it was the right thing to do. And now here was Daniel, standing in front of him, just when Kofi needed him the most. Daniel. Kofi's face lit up with a mixture of surprise and relief. It had been so long since he had seen his old friend, and seeing him now felt like a ray of sunshine in the middle of a storm. "What are you doing here?" Kofi asked, his voice filled with both wonder and hope. Daniel smiled, but there was a look of concern in his eyes. "I heard what happened. I heard you were back in town and that things weren't going well. I came to find you. You don't have to do this alone, Kofi." Kofi couldn't believe it. After everything that had happened, someone still cared about him. Daniel reached out and gave him a big hug, and for the first time in weeks, Kofi felt a small sense of warmth. Maybe there was hope after all. "I know things are tough," Daniel said, "but Mira and I have a small place. It's not much, but it's home. You can stay with us, Kofi. We'll help you get back on your feet." Kofi felt a tear slip down his cheek, but this time it wasn't from sadness, it was from relief. After everything that had happened, after all the people who had turned away from him, here was someone who still cared. Daniel and his wife, Mira, didn't ask for anything in return. They didn't judge him or turn their back on him. They just offered their home and their friendship. "Thank you," Kofi said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much." Daniel and Mira didn't make Kofi feel like he owed them anything. They simply welcomed him with open arms, giving him a place to stay, a warm meal, and a sense of peace. Their home was small, but it was full of love and kindness. It was everything Kofi had been missing for so long. Over the next few months, Kofi regained his strength. Every day he felt a little bit better. The kindness from Daniel and Mira gave him the hope he needed to believe that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. And as he spent more time with his friends, Kofi realized something important. There were still good people in the world, people who cared about him for who he was, not what he could give them. But just when Kofi thought things were finally looking up, he discovered something that shocked him to the core. He overheard a conversation that made his heart race. He wasn't meant to hear it, but the door was slightly open, and he couldn't ignore what they were saying. "Are you sure Kofi can be trusted?" Mira asked quietly. "I mean, he's been through so much, but he's still our friend, right?" Daniel hesitated for a moment before answering. "I trust him, Mira. But there's something he hasn't told us. I don't think he's really as broke as he says he is. I think he came back for a reason, to test us, to see if we would be loyal." Kofi's heart stopped. He knew. Daniel knew Kofi had returned to test people's loyalty. Kofi sat there, frozen, his mind spinning. He had come back home with nothing, pretending to be broke and desperate, but he didn't expect anyone to figure it out so soon. He thought he could trust Daniel and Mira, but now he wondered, was this part of his test too? As the conversation continued, Kofi felt a knot tighten in his chest. Was everything he had worked for, everything he had planned, really just a game to test loyalty? Was he really that desperate to know who would be there for him? Before Kofi could process his thoughts any further, Daniel walked into the room and saw Kofi sitting by the door, looking stunned. "Kofi, you heard, didn't you?" Daniel asked, his voice calm but serious. Kofi nodded, unsure of how to react. "I didn't mean to overhear, but yes, I heard." Daniel walked over and sat down next to Kofi. "Listen, I'm not mad. In fact, I respect what you did. You wanted to know who would be there for you when things got tough, and you were right to test us. But I want you to know, Kofi, that we don't need any tests. We're your friends, and that's all that matters." Kofi felt a wave of relief wash over him again. He had been so scared that Daniel would be angry or disappointed. But instead, Daniel had respected his decision, even if it meant Kofi had been a little dishonest. "I'm sorry, Daniel," Kofi said, his voice filled with regret. "I never meant to deceive you. I just didn't know who I could trust anymore." Daniel smiled and clapped him on the back. "It's okay, Kofi. We all make mistakes, but we've got your back. No more tests, okay? Let's move forward together." And just like that, Kofi realized something important. Sometimes the people who truly care about you don't need to be tested. They show up, even when you've lost everything. Daniel and Mira had proven that to him, and he was ready to accept their kindness, no strings attached. Months passed by, and Kofi slowly began to heal. Living with Daniel and Mira was nothing like the cold, lonely nights he had spent in the unfinished building. It wasn't just the roof over his head that made him feel better, it was the warmth of their kindness, their friendship, and the way they treated him like family. They didn't care that he was once wealthy, nor did they mind that he had nothing now. They just wanted him to feel safe, to be himself again. Kofi found a job working at a local store, and little by little, he started to regain his confidence. He even began to laugh again. Daniel and Mira's home, though small, was full of life. They shared meals together, talked about the good old days, and most importantly, they made Kofi feel like he wasn't alone in the world anymore. It felt like the family he never had. But as much as Kofi appreciated everything they had done for him, he still carried a secret that, despite everything, he hadn't yet shared with Daniel or Mira. One evening after dinner, Kofi sat in the living room with Daniel and Mira. They were talking about their plans for the future when Kofi suddenly felt the need to speak up. He took a deep breath, his hand shaking a little. "Daniel, Mira," Kofi began, his voice soft but steady. "There's something I need to tell you. I wasn't completely honest when I came back." Daniel and Mira both stopped talking and turned to him, their eyes filled with curiosity. "You see," Kofi continued, his heart racing, "I wasn't really broke when I came back. I had money saved up, but I wanted to see who would be there for me, no matter what. I wanted to know if the people I helped would still stand by me when things went wrong." Daniel raised an eyebrow, but he didn't look angry. Mira, however, was silent, her eyes searching Kofi's face for any sign of doubt. Kofi could feel the tension building up. He had tested his family, his wife and his friends, but now he realized that the test had been just as much about him as it was about them. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," Kofi said quickly, trying to explain. I had to know. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. Ifia, my sister, she turned on me. My wife, Quaim, she rejected me when I returned with nothing. I needed to know who would stick by me, who would still care. Mira was the first to speak. "You didn't trust us from the start." Her voice wasn't angry, but there was sadness in it. "Kofi, you came to us as a friend, and we took you in because that's what friends do. You didn't have to test us. We would have helped you, no matter what." Kofi hung his head, feeling ashamed. "I know now. I'm sorry. I should have trusted you from the beginning." Daniel smiled and placed a hand on Kofi's shoulder. "It's okay, Kofi. We understand. You've been through a lot, and we're just happy that you're here now. You don't have to prove anything to us. We're your friends, and we'll always have your back." The relief that washed over Kofi in that moment was like a heavy burden being lifted from his chest. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. His journey had been filled with pain, disappointment, and loneliness, but sitting there with Daniel and Mira, he realized that they had proven something to him. Loyalty and love don't come with conditions. Kofi had done it. Against all odds, he had turned his life around. The man who had returned home with nothing, rejected by those he trusted most, was now a millionaire. His business boomed, and the dream he once had of helping his family had expanded into something even greater. Daniel and Mira, who had opened their hearts to Kofi when he had nothing, were now not just his friends but business partners. Together, they had worked tirelessly, building a successful real estate empire. Kofi's name was known across the country, and his story of resilience was shared by people everywhere. He had come from nothing, and now he had everything. But Kofi wasn't content with just having wealth. He wanted to give back to the people who had been there for him when no one else was. His loyalty to Daniel and Mira ran deep, and he couldn't imagine his life without them. So, to show his appreciation, he decided to do something incredible. One day, after closing a major deal on a new property development, Kofi invited Daniel and Mira out for a celebration. He took them to a luxury car dealership, one of the best in the country. As they walked through the shiny showroom, Kofi turned to them with a grin. "Pick anything you want," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. "Today I'm buying you both a car, no limits, no budget. You've earned this and more." Daniel and Mira exchanged surprised glances, unsure if they had heard him correctly. "Kofi, you don't have to do this," Daniel said, his voice filled with disbelief. But Kofi just shook his head. "I want to. You stood by me when no one else did. Now, I'm going to give you what you deserve." Mira, still shocked, walked over to the nearest sports car, her hand running over its sleek design. "I never imagined, but if you're serious..." "I am," Kofi said. "I've spent years giving everything I had to people who didn't care. Now I'm going to give to the ones who truly matter." Daniel walked over to a powerful luxury SUV, eyes wide. "Kofi, this is incredible. We can't accept this." "You're not accepting anything," Kofi said with a smile. "You've earned it, Daniel. You and Mira showed me what true friendship and loyalty look like. These cars are a small token compared to everything you've done for me." However, not everyone was happy about Kofi's success. His ex-wife, Kwame, was still living in the past, struggling with her own life. She had seen the news Kofi was everywhere, his name being mentioned on TV and in the papers. She had heard about the luxurious lifestyle he was now leading, and she couldn't ignore the ache in her heart. She had rejected him when he returned home with nothing. But now she saw how far he had come. Kwame couldn't stand it any longer. She needed to see Kofi. She needed to beg for forgiveness, to somehow make things right. She wanted him back, to be a part of his success, to be a part of the life he had built for himself. She knew she had made a mistake, and now, desperate and broken, she reached out to Kofi. One day, Kofi received a message from Kwame. She wanted to meet. She claimed she had changed and needed his forgiveness. She asked for another chance. With a sigh, Kofi knew what was coming. He couldn't deny the feelings of anger and hurt that still lingered. He knew this moment was inevitable, but that didn't mean he was ready to open the door to someone who had cast him aside when he needed her most. And they sat across from each other at a quiet cafe. Kwame looked tired, worn down by the years of struggle. Her eyes were filled with regret, but there was also hope. "Kofi," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you. I turned my back on you when you needed me the most. I was wrong, and I can't take back the things I said. Please, forgive me. I want to make things right." Kofi looked at her, the woman who had once been his partner, the woman who had left him when he had nothing to offer. He felt a mix of emotions, anger, hurt, but also a quiet sense of closure. "You had your chance," Kofi said, his voice calm but firm. "I gave everything to you. I trusted you. But when I came back, I had nothing, and you turned away from me without a second thought." Kwame's eyes filled with tears, but Kofi didn't waver. "I've forgiven you, but I won't forget. I've moved on. You had the chance to stand by me, and you didn't." With that, Kofi stood up, his heart heavier than ever but also stronger. "Goodbye, Kwame," he said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but I won't be part of your life anymore." As he walked away from the cafe, Kofi felt a sense of finality settle over him. The past was behind him. He had forgiven, but he would never forget. He had found the true meaning of loyalty, and he had learned that sometimes forgiveness means letting go and moving forward, but the hard lessons still remained.